Please welcome on stage the AMI Specialist Consultant from EY, Rashid Khan, for this morning's Masterclass.
So, good morning, everyone, and just want to start by thanking the SWAN team for giving me the opportunity to, unpack this topic. And I'm hoping that, we're going to make it very interactive today. I'm going to say a few words at the start, but really I'm going to get to all of the tables and we're going to ask a number of questions. We've got some exercises that we're going to do with everyone today. I should see the laser. So, yeah, I think maybe where I can start off is just saying that the last time that I was at the SWAN conference, or when it first came to Cape Town, I had the opportunity to present to many of you that were there, some new faces, but at the time I had the ability to present around the topic of benefits of smart water programs or advanced metering infrastructure programs. And a big part of those benefits of those programs was really about what type of improvements they unlock, and a lot of it was around resilience. It was about just practically thinking around how we structure the programs. So a big part of it looked at what was the art of the possible. It looked at, what is it that we can do different, et cetera, et cetera. But what really struck me during that engagement was we kind of left that room with this energy. Everyone after the sessions, were contacting us, were looking to meet with the team and really understand, what about these benefits, and how are they quantified and how are they calculated, And throughout those engagements, and not just those, but over the many years that I've supported these types of programs, what I've come to realize is that these days it's not around the strategy. It is not around the strategy that's the problem. But in fact, when I speak to many of the clients that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, what I see is that within their vision documents, within their strategy documents, what I see is that they are starting to move in a correct direction. What I see is a lot of strategies and vision documents that are seeming to move into the world of understanding data-driven operations, that are looking to understand on how best to deliver 21st century operations, that are looking at understanding how is it that we can pilot some sort of smart water program or some sort of AMI water program. So that's not really, I see as a major issue these days. But what I do find as a major problem, which I'm calling the Achilles heel, is where the vision and the strategy is going to live or die. And that is around procurement, and in particular procurement design. So most of us of late, over the last 2 years, have seen a variety of major tenders that have come out from various municipalities that have come out from state-owned entities, and a lot of us, have been part of either working and responding to those particular procurement tenders, or we've been sitting on the side of the client helping to actually put together these tender documentations. And what I've come to realize is that it seems to me, when we look at all of these complicated tender packages or tender procurement processes, it seems to me that we are attempting to, deliver a 21st century digital and an AMI solution, but it's almost as though we are, working within sort of a 20th century thinking around how procurement needs to be designed. So there's what I call a bit of an implementation reality, right? And that is that strategy and the vision ultimately is delivered through a set of contracts and a particular procurement design. And in the 21st century, there is a modern AMI reality that we are needing to have outcomes which, really look back at important KPIs. We are working with lots of data. We are looking at integrations that are deeply complex, and we have requirements that are ever evolving within our programs, be it smart metering, AMI, or these digital programs. However, what we're finding is that many of the current procurement logic looks at fixed scopes, are very compliance-driven, focuses on the lowest price, looks at how much of risk can we transfer across. And this mismatch is creating a little bit of a friction. It's creating delays, it's creating disputes, it's creating dependencies, it's creating frustration. So what I want us to do today is really explore this gap. And it's about not criticizing procurement, it's not about criticizing governance, but it's asking the more important question. And that is, what does it really mean to rethink procurement for a modern water service delivery? Because procurement is that paperwork before we actually start delivery. And if we get that right, everything that comes afterwards will be a lot easier for the program. So when we talk about rethinking procurement, we are not talking about going faster. When we talk about rethinking procurement, we are not talking about less governance, less compliance. That's not what we're talking about. When we talk about rethinking procurement, we are saying that we are asking procurement systems that are designed for physical infrastructure to now procure digital operating platforms that are being implemented in organizations that currently work in very complex legacy systems and processes. And those two things are not the same. So there's this structural gap or mismatch in terms of the traditional infrastructure logic that looks at a very fixed scope, that looks at a stable asset, that looks at defining all the requirements up front, and looks at handover at being the endpoint. Very compliance-focused, very price-focused. But in our modern digital and AMI reality, the fact is that we have evolving requirements. We have operating models within businesses and organizations that are changing. We have new data ecosystems. We have adoption within operation teams that are becoming very important. So the reality is value is not just necessarily created at handover, but value is going to be created in stabilization. Value is going to be created in adoption. And that is the structural tension that we are going to be focusing on. Our strategies and vision lives within PowerPoint slides and well-written documents. And procurement lives in very important documentation. Tenders that get advertised, contracts that get signed. And the problem that we are seeing is that that very transformation that we are coming up with, that we are focusing on, the problem is that it can very easily just shrink within your procurement design. So, what I want to explore is a little bit around what actually fails at the moment. And I'll give some practical examples. This obviously just a viewpoint, and I don't know if anyone in the room, maybe by way of hands, I think about 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was a very large tender that came out of Eskom around a new head-end, a meter data management and a smart meter operation center. It was a very, very complex bid. And a lot of the market was struggling to respond to it, right? Because they were overwhelmed by the amount of specifications, the type of compliance that was required. Maybe by show of hands, is anyone here actually looked at that particular tender by any chance? Anyone looked at it? Anyone, what did anyone think about it? Maybe that's what we're going to unpack today. But some of the issues that I'm seeing at the moment is that in many of our procurement design, I see specifications that are sometimes too loose. For example, I see the words, give me analytics or provide me analytics, but what I don't see is an explanation of what do you mean by that? Like what type of use case are we trying to achieve? What type of KPI? What type of integration logic? Then on the other hand, we have specifications that seem to be very over-engineered, long feature lists, long compliance checklists, more compliance checklists, wrapped up in more scope documents, contractual templates. And the market's struggling with that at the moment. When they look through that, it just feels very over-engineered. And what's missing in a lot of our procurement design, I find, is where is the accountability for integration? What are the stabilization matrix? How are we going to define what is operational success? On another note, the other issues that we are seeing are around pricing and incentive misalignment. So what we are seeing within our procurement designs is that there is a lot of transfer of risk down to your solution and your technology providers. And that transfer of risk, right? Boards of these companies sit and look at it very carefully, and they are worried about it. In other instances, we see fixed scopes that are too early in demanding performance guarantees. And so now you get a lot of the large tier 1 service providers that are just looking at this and are saying, this risk to me is very unmanageable. Right? So what happens? When a risk becomes unmanageable for your solution and your service providers, one, you're going to see subcontracting or tier 1 providers go behind subcontractors that might be unknown over the last decade, that have just formed the last couple of months. You find that the pricing of procurement is much higher than we anticipated, right? And ultimately, Who's paying for that? The public is paying for that. And in certain instances, you're seeing your providers actually step back and saying, we're actually not going to respond. So that is some of what we're seeing. The other issues we have around pricing. We are good at putting together pricing, for meters, for software, for installation. But what we don't price within our procurement designs, or what we don't build the design in a pricing schedule, is around operational readiness, around how we're going to stabilize, around how we're going to transfer capability to organizations, be it utilities, municipalities. So this is just some of the issues that we're seeing. However, I thought, given what I said at the start, I wanted to make this very interactive. I thought, let's start off by really getting down to the ground with everyone here. And what we're going to do is we are going to run what we call a bit of a Mentimeter session. Okay. Now, for those of you that haven't done Mentimeter before, what you'll see up on your screen is a QR code that you can scan with your phone, or you can simply go to the website that's at the bottom of the screen, www.menti.com, and there's a code that you're going to enter. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask a couple of questions to the audience. There's about 2 or 3 questions that we're going to get into, and then we're going to actually debrief them as we go along. So I'm just going to give it a couple of more seconds if everyone can scan the QR code. And I think we'll answer one question at a time. So what you shouldn't do is attempt to answer all 3. I think that normally gets locked, but we'll start off with the first question. Okay. So I think if we can just move to the next slide. Okay. So the first question that we're going to ask everyone, whether you are sitting on the client side or the service or the solution side, right, is around sure. I think we're on the wrong. Yeah? I think we'll just give it a few seconds. So the first question is around what is the biggest procurement challenge that you have experienced in AMI or digital water projects? So, not the question? No. Yeah. Okay. I think it's question 3. So, yeah. Okay. So question 3 is around, does your procurement model test more delivery? Oh, it's back to the first one. Okay, we're back there. Okay, so that's the first question. First question, whether you are sitting on the client side or is the service provider side, is I want to know what's the biggest procurement challenge you've experienced in AMI or a digital water project. 1 to 3 words, be very specific. Think about what causes friction. Okay, I see budget come up quite a number of times. Writing specifications. Budget and writing specifications seem to be a very dominant theme. I'm not sure. I think we have some of the team from Treasury. Maybe just put your hands up. So let's talk a little bit about that. I know Treasury key in putting together the RT29 tender document, one of its first for the country. I don't know if we've got a roving mic that we can use. We can get that to the team over here, but I'd maybe just want to hear from the team at Treasury, what were some of the challenges you had in looking at putting together that specification? Yeah.
Thank you, and good morning to the colleagues. Our challenge is basically to define the end-to-end solution for the RT29. We try to include every deliverable, starting from hardware, platform, and then later on even support. And it's to define that sufficiently for the market to understand that and then get a positive response to the actual ask. I think I will just hand over to my Senedi colleagues to maybe support us. We've appointed the South African National Energy Development Institute as our project manager. And maybe they can just maybe add from their perspective as well.
No, thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues, again. I tend to agree with the sentiments that the budget is also an issue. I mean, for the RT29, for example, one of the biggest challenges we have is that we've got limited budget. Although we want to support as many municipalities as possible, but in terms of what is available, there's a certain number of municipalities that we can support. Now, coming to how we respect the RT29, I agree with my colleague that that has been one of the challenges that during the implementation, for example, we found that there are certain elements that we have not catered for, especially on the electricity side, for example. And that becomes a bit of a challenge because once you've awarded the tender, you have to stick to what has been published, what you have agreed on. And some of these elements or components tend to be critical in actually making sure that the project is successful. And we have found that that has been a challenge, and we are hoping that in the next round, we will be able to sort that out. Thanks.
Perfect. I think it's good to hear from the team at Treasury, and I think we're going to hear a lot more of this today. You know, what are some of the challenges that we are experiencing, and then what are some of the solutions? I think then the next question is, and I can already see some of the responses, is where do you believe most AMI procurement failures originate from? So there's 6 questions that we've got. Is it around poor specification design? Is it around misaligned contracting models? Is it around risk allocation imbalance? Too much of risk down to the market or not enough? Is it around weak governance after the award? Is it around unrealistic pricing expectation? Or is it around market capability gaps? And I think what's interesting, question 1 around poor specification, question 5 around unrealistic pricing expectations are coming up. Misaligned contracting models, I think that's an interesting one. So where's that mic? I think I'll pick on Yanda. So Yanda, any comments that you have around contracting models? What, in your experience, what have you seen around contracting models in water service delivery? You know, what do you feel are some of the issues that we're dealing with at the moment?
You're putting me on the spot. I think for me, it would be the, remember when it comes to AMI, there's a construction element of it, and there's also the communication side of it. So striking that balance is rather challenging, but I think we've overcame that challenge. So what the city does, in order for you to determine your contracting strategy, then you need to do a baseline to check where, in effect, will be more of your project, which side is it lying on. I think on our side it had to lie on the treasury side because of the cost of the smart water meters. So I think it's very important there, therefore, when you do that contracting strategy, do that detailed check in terms of which way are you lying on. I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Shanda. I think, Sean? Maybe Sean is the next one to pick on. And I think let's finish up with this question, and then we can pass over to Sean. But the last question that we have is around, what do you strongly disagree with or agree with? Do you disagree that your procurement model is more delivery capability, oriented, or is it more compliance based? So if you believe it's more around compliance, you disagree. If you believe it's more around capability, you'd agree. So I just want to see, where does everyone feel at the moment in any of their procurement processes? Where have they sort of landed up? It's quite a confusing one, I must admit, but this was the trick one, just to wake up everyone. But as we're doing that, I think, Sean, the background and how I also came to this topic, I recall is that one day I remember phoning Sean, and I said, Sean, we need to find every specification document that we can find globally. So we went to Australia, America, Europe. We obtained every procurement design document that we could find, and we went through all of those documents, and all of them were not up to the level we felt that it needed to be at. You know, a lot of time is not spent in this design. But Sean, I think maybe if you wanted to comment a little bit about the previous results.
Yeah, no problem. Is the mic on? Yes. Good morning, everybody. Sean Mason, Water Research Centre UK. Privilege of working with Rashid over a number of years. And I remember stating very early on that one of the biggest challenges is we've got a 21st century AMI solution, but we're using 1980s procurement. And the lesson that we've been learning over the last few years on many utilities around the world is we're focusing so much on the technology, but we're not focusing on the procurement. And when we write our design models, we really should be focusing on how are we going to procure this, not how is the technology going to work. And I think, what Rashid's raised this morning has been excellent, and it's been, in hindsight, we've learned an awful lot. Moving forward, you look at the biggest risk around implementing a mass deployment of AMI smart meters anywhere in the world. The biggest challenge that everybody has come up with is procurement. Not technology, not metadata, it's procurement, and also the operating model that goes around that procurement. So it's great to see we're having this debate today, and I think probably the challenges you put up on the previous slides are the real challenges in terms of how do we move procurement quicker, faster? How does it move towards a data as a service, network as a service model? And I think it's something that we're learning about, and certainly for people who are now implementing programs, I think we would emphasize a real kind of focus on get the procurement right, the rest will follow to a certain extent.
Thanks, Sean. Indeed so. So, 30. Sorry? 30. Yeah. So, I guess the next thing that we wanted to do was run a bit of a very practical room exercise. We're going to do it at your table. So ideally, you don't want to be seer one person at a table, but hopefully you can join another table. But there's a handout, and we're going to just explain that handout. So there should be a document with some gray headings on every page. And what I wanted to do is, I wanted everyone in the tables to sit, and I want you to put yourself in the shoes of, that executive member or that project team, right? I want you to for this next few minutes, pretend you are that person, and I want you to think that this is, or know that this is your first large AMI tender or project that you're going to be running. It's your first scaled program that you're going to be running with. And you at your tables, you have no experience in AMI. I mean, I know that's not true. We've got some tables that's got years and years, but you've got no AMI experience. You've got very limited integration capabilities within your IT teams. You are strong at governance from a procurement perspective, but don't have a good sense of digital workflows and new ecosystems, right? You have lots of political oversight on your program. Revenue is under a lot of pressure, okay? There's lots of expectations on you. And now one of the key decisions that you need to make is, what contracting model am I going to choose for my program? So there's a couple of options. The first option is a single prime contract, or what's famously known from my colleague Tertius, the single throat to choke. So the first one is, are we going to go with a full turnkey solution? Meters, installation, operations, etc., full. The second one is, are we going to go with very similar to a prime contract, but this time we're going to build a lot of clauses around transferring capability, good KPIs. We're going to measure stabilization in our procurement design. Your third option is, you're actually going to decide to break up your program. So meters and installation goes to 1, 2, or 3 different providers. The network, which is a very important part of the program, will go to another. Operations to another. Systems to another. Your fourth option is that you've realized telcos are critical in AMI programs, and you're completely worried about the network. Who manages it? Who owns it? So you've got a bit of a telco solution or a contracting type model that you might be looking at. And the last one is a bit of a hybrid. So your task, you've got about 5 or 6 minutes. I want you to select one contracting model at your table, and I want you to identify 3 of the biggest risks that you've chosen in your model, and 1 safeguard. That's basically what I want to do. So there's no right and wrong. Be decisive. And what we're going to do, we're going to pick on 1 or 2 of the tables. So pick a representative that can talk. And we're going to go to that table, and we're going to ask you what your selection was. Okay, I think everyone, let's call it time. So if everyone can just settle down, I think what we're going to do is start debriefing this exercise. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to choose 1 or 2 or 3 tables. I'm going to basically ask you, what model did you choose? Why did you choose that model? What was the biggest risk that you identified? And what's 1 safeguard that you applied? So I think the first table that I'm going to pick on is Ethereum, your table.
Good.
Okay, everyone, I think if we can just give Ethereum.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, morning, afternoon. Where's Africa? Shall I sing the anthem? I'm going to ask, we chose model B, so prime plus transferal of proportional risk. And Charles de Kock from Koga Municipality, they are in a very interesting phase in gathering of information and thinking about how to procure and how to proceed. So I think from an embodied experience, I'll allow Charles to share exactly where in Koga's journey they are. Thanks, Charles.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I would perhaps start off by saying horses for courses. I think every situation is different. Every municipality is different. Every metro is different. So currently our position is that we need to first data collect. There's a lot of different scenarios playing off. We have 9 towns. We have different, let's say, residence capabilities. So for some towns, we'll just go for restrictors. But other towns there is the necessity to look at efficiency. So when I went through this, I just thought that, we should perhaps have a prime contractor, and then those areas where we feel the risks are mitigatable, we'll have to come up with SLAs, which we put in place so that those aspects are also covered. I would not go for a single service provider, although there's some luxuries in that. You make one person responsible for everything. But in our situations, you can just not make him responsible for everything. So I would go for a service provider which is renowned, where we can trust the product, where we've seen this product, where we've benchmarked the product. And then also, currently we're running, as I said, the research and the data collection where we have this product in theory with our mechanical meters so that we can just see what's happening. Because out of the data, there's a lot of adjustments that I feel that we should be able to make while we make it before we go out to a prime contractor. So it's horses for courses, and I think there's so many variables that can play off that we need to spend sufficient time in planning so that when we roll out, we're not caught out. Because I think in this industry, there's a lot of lessons learned, a lot of best practices, which we should be able to share with each other to make this a success overall in South Africa.
Thanks.
Chair, just 2 more points. Thanks for that, Charles. To add on the 2 key risks that was identified. One was the communications, network stability. I think when Sia spoke earlier, she spoke about how the city increased revenue. So with the reliability on communications being up all the time, that is a risk that we saw, and that needs to be agreed upon via an SLA to a telco service provider. The second risk we spoke about was with all this data coming in and vast amounts of data coming into the utility, are utilities ready to digest all that information from a resource point of view? So we need to look at upskilling utility or municipal staff to be on par with the levels of data coming in. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I think we're going to pick on Leonardo's table. Let's go. I think get your steps in. Andrea, I think you're going to present.
I just walked into this. Okay, from our table, we decided to go with model B, so that's prime contractor by plus the structural capability transfer. Some of the risks that we have seen here that can come up from it, so for example, the shadowing and co-running period, as well as the capability transfer milestones as well. You do get the lack of commitment from trainees that are coming into this. So when we are saying, let's say, shadowing, what's going to happen is that we put out a team from, for example, City of Cape Town, and we go all in and train them, and then you come a month down the line and they are not basically interested in what they are doing. So that lack of commitment, understanding, and drive. And that's what we need for successful tenders, is the drive in what we are looking forward and understanding what we want to accomplish at the end. Any other risks that you want to add?
So I think our colleagues also touched on it at the other table, knowledge transfer. So if we're putting all of our eggs in one basket, that as massive positives, but there's also a risk in terms of performance and then knowledge transfer into the city as well. We also noted that as a potential risk.
Brilliant. Look, in the interest of time, I think, I hope what you found in the exercise is that there's no right or wrong. And with all of these questions, I think what we must realize is that it's not about technical issues that we're having, but it's about a structural design that we need to get right from day one. And that's why when I started, I said the Achilles heel is around procurement design. So what we are seeing across many, AMI, not just AMI tenders, but of late I've seen lots of non-revenue water tenders that have come out, revenue enhancement and assurance tenders that have come out from very large municipalities. And I think what we are seeing is that, they are governance strong, but they seem to be strategy weak. They are not bringing in the strategies that are being formulated, are not correctly being brought into our procurement design, right? We are specifying a lot of features and technical checklists, etc., but what we are forgetting are the workflows. And the workflows is before you even start writing the tender or the tender specification, you're supposed to be engaging your operations teams, understanding all the workflows and making sure that ultimately you've got some sort of business-led specification that is being conceived. We are still deeply pricing installation and meters and software, but we are not looking at pricing stabilization, adoption. And as I mentioned, that's where a lot of the value is. So we need to reward more on adoption. We need to reward more on stabilization, okay? And we need to be very careful around the allocation of risks. Allocating all the risks to the market, right, is not allocating risks intelligently. Risk dumping does not mean risk management. And when you do that, I'm sure if you ask someone like Petrus, what is he going to tell you? He's going to tell you our global teams, we are looking at all types of tenders, and some of them they are not allowed to respond to. Because they also sit with boards, they also sit with senior leadership, and when something feels too risky, your top providers will walk away. So the question is, what does better look like? And I'm hoping to walk through some practical steps or practical solutions that we can talk about. I don't think I have a lot of time, but let's get through a few of them. I think the first one is that before writing a specification or even commencing with your procurement design, very important to start with all the operating workflows within your organization. If you don't have the ability to map out those workflows from installation through to commissioning, through to leak detection, my question is, are we really ready to write our specification? So the message to the teams out there is make sure business is part of putting together those specifications, because it is your business and your operation teams that understand where they want to go towards. What are their challenges? It is those challenges that need to cascade down into your procurement design. The second important item is to really separate installation from operationalization. It's not just about putting the device or the meter into the ground. but really it's about what happens afterwards. Who is the team that we're handing over to? What are their capabilities? Do they understand the new data ecosystem? What type of adoption do we need to drive? So some serious metrics need to be built within our procurement design, and these need to incentivize the aspect of operationalization. The third one is that not all risks belong to the vendors and the solution providers, but similarly, not all risks belong to the utilities, the municipalities, and the client. One needs to carefully look at your integration risks. You need to look at your data migration risks. You need to look at your change management risks. You need to look at your cybersecurity risks. And you need to carefully understand who actually controls these risks and how are we going to make sure that we correctly address them within our procurement design. Very important, we need to start really testing delivery capability and not just documentation. Currently, many of our tenders look very carefully at documentation, but delivery capability is becoming increasingly important. How we formulate our approach becomes very important. Therefore, sample demonstrations are becoming a very important part of our procurement design. And a lot of focus needs to go into these demonstrations, whether it be proof of concepts, limited pilot initiatives, or just some proper engagements with the teams that we might be contracting in the future are becoming very important. I'm going to skip through a few of them. The last one I might want to talk about is on structured market engagement. So when we want to engage the market, we see requests for information that come out, and many of us don't respond to those RFIs. We are worried about the intellectual property that goes into an RFI. We are worried about where that information goes through and how it comes back out into the market. So we need to carefully think about structured market engagement, and this goes beyond sending out an RFI. And there's a lot of worry. The minute we need to engage the market, there's always a worry about, am I going to get conflicted a couple of weeks or months, etc. So there's a lot of concerns around that, but we need to give some proper think through around market engagement. There's many other potential solutions that we can look at, making sure that your project teams, your sponsors are well engaged within your procurement processes, your contract form, how you select that. Collaborative models are becoming increasingly important. And pricing flexibility, what that means and how you cascade that into a pricing schedule becomes very important, so that, as mentioned later on, when we realize that we want to change a certain way, to do that very safely and within, the confines of the rules we operate in, becomes a little bit easier. So, yeah, I think to end off, the message I want to leave everyone with is that your procurement design determines your delivery reality. If you get this wrong, everything afterwards becomes harder. So the message that I'm leaving everyone with is that if you are in a position today where you're about to work on that procurement design, I hope this topic sits with you and you can think through, how can I change that design? How can I improve that design? How can I mitigate some of the risks that have been discussed today? And those of you that ordinarily are responding to this procurement and contractual initiatives that come out, whether it be from the public and the private sector, I hope that you spend some time in really educating the market in a whole lot more detail, you know. Having these workshops that US technology providers set up from time to time are a very important place for clients to come and meet and understand your solutions. So again, I'd just like to thank everyone for, you know, being very participative in the sessions, and I hope afterwards during lunch you can find some time to connect and unpack a few of these challenges. And yeah, I think the team here as well, Sean, Ken, very experienced, so do talk to them around some of these challenges. But thanks a lot to everyone. Yeah. Good.